Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, come back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Ezra Edmond. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ezra Edmond. I'm a writer, director, line producer who works in animation.
Alrighty. So, you are from San Fernando Valley. What was it like growing up in, what is your origin story?
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, like you said, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I grew up kind of between Encino, Reseda, Sherman Oaks, in that area. So, growing up as a kid, my dad's family had moved out here from Alabama when he was a teenager. My mom's family had been out here. She was born out here. So they both met out here, but she was second generation in the Valley. Her parents had moved out before she was born. So, me growing up, I liked it. It's funny. I never really went into the city that much. I was always just kind of doing things out here. So, because, in LA, I mean, there's been moments where people go to downtown to do lots of things, but then we'll have like big stretches where there's like nobody going downtown to do anything. So growing up, it was great. There were a lot of kids on my block. There were, it's a very diverse neighborhood. There were a lot of kids of all different backgrounds, some a little older than me, some a little younger than me. We used to play in the front yard a lot, play up and down the street in everybody's backyard. And that was nice. And I went to school all around here too. So, you get to know everybody and pretty well.
It's so interesting how small the world used to be, and not even in just relation to technology, but just we used to just kind of stay in our neighborhoods a lot. I know I'm from Detroit, but I lived in New Orleans, and a lot of people before Hurricane Katrina really didn't leave their neighborhoods, much less the state. And so it's just so interesting how in different parts of the country, America's so big, but it was yeah, my neighborhood though, this is cool.
Yeah, it's funny. I always think about that in terms of California. You have people who don't live in California and they all think that it's whoever they see on whatever TV show, or they think everything's like Silver Lake, or they think everything's like San Francisco or something. And then, you come to LA, but then you go to the Valley and it's different. And then you go to, if you go to Santa Clarita, or if you were to go an hour out of Los Angeles, and it's just a completely different place. There's not one way of how it all is. And it's nice to explore and see that.
Yeah. What are some of your best childhood memories?
I mean, just like I was saying, playing in the yard was always really fun, just like doing lemonade stands or doing garage sales or just biking, running up and down the block, rollerblading. I used to love pogo stick a lot. I don't do it as much now because now I'm older, so I have the fear of falling.
Right.
Yeah, but when I was a kid, I was like, whatever, I'll do that. Yeah, I love doing that. When I was in middle school and high school, I did a lot of musical theater. That was really fun. I went to a musical theater middle school, so it was fun because we got to do a show every semester, and that was really cool. Otherwise, just going to the movies, barbecuing with my family, sleepovers with friends, and reading books, and I don't know, just hanging out and trying to be creative, make a little movie in the backyard with my friends, and like my mom's VHS camera.
Nice.
Yeah.
What is your cultural makeup? And that's not only to say with your ethnicity, but what is the culture of where you grew up and the uniqueness of where you're from?
I mean, it's a good question. With being a kid in the Valley, I think it's interesting just because it's the Valley is such a diverse place in terms of race, ethnicity, class, income level. You go up into the hills and there's the richest people that you ever heard of, and you go into the middle of the Valley, and everybody has these huge properties that they got really cheap, and they have whole farms happening on them, and all these things are 1 mile away from each other. My mom's side of the family is Jewish from Europe, and my dad's side of the family is Black from Alabama. And so there's just obviously the racial, ethnic differences there too. But I would say that for me, I grew up not particularly religious by any means. Just
Hmm.
doing all the holidays on both sides of the family with the family, whether it's going to a community event to do a big Christmas with like everybody on my dad's family, or everyone coming over doing a big Christmas party, or going to my grandma's house to do a Passover dinner, or everyone coming over somewhere to do like an Easter egg hunt. My family was always and still is always very into let's try to do a little bit of everything, and
Yeah.
have fun and expose everyone to what's going on. And
Hmm.
and as a kid, I was an only child too. I have a cousin who is also an only child, and we're only 9 days apart in age.
Nice.
And we were the first grandchildren born. So we were basically raised like we're cousins, even though we're different ethnicities. Not cousins. We're basically raised like we're twins. I meant to say.
Hmm.
Everyone was always like, the boys are doing that. The boys are getting in trouble. It wasn't like one or the other.
Yeah.
So I have no, I have no siblings, but I have a twin in a way.
Yeah.
But my family's always been very into just trying to get out and travel and meet different people, and do different things, and see how you can incorporate that back into your life, and where and just try to be exposed to stuff.
Yeah. I understand being grouped together. I actually have a twin, so
Oh
like,
yeah, okay. So you know how it is for real.
yeah, like I left Michigan to go to college so I could be an individual.
No, I know what you mean. I feel like that's like when, when I was a kid and my cousin, when we were both kids, we always so often wanted to do our own thing. But like if there was a birthday party, we're doing the birthday party together. When
Yeah.
we had our bar mitzvahs, we're doing that together because the family's only gonna come out once, so we're gonna do it
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And then the one difference of being a twin who's not really a twin is then at the
Hmm.
end of the day, you go back to your house and you can sit and do your own thing, and nobody's up in your space anymore.
Right, right. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what is your favorite custom or tradition from your culture? Or like what is your like favorite custom or tradition that's like family specific that you did growing up?
Sure. I mean, family specific. I mean, it's hard to say like a specific one thing, but I love getting
Hmm.
together with everyone for the holidays. And
Yeah.
obviously the group changes as as people get older, people have kids, like everything happens and it all changes. But it's always nice to just get together, and almost all the parties that my family ever has are potlucks. So
Hmm.
everybody's making something, we're all getting together and we're eating, and just hanging out and spending time together, whether we're just all sitting around the table or if we ever play games or stuff too. But usually, even if we're just sitting around the table, it's just always nice to do as many holidays as possible, just so that
Yeah.
everyone that's when people take the time to get together, right? Is like
Yeah.
when there's like a holiday or an important event going, someone's wedding, everyone's going to go. But like you say, hey, what is everyone doing on Thursday? And like nobody's free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
So what about cultural traditions?
Yeah, I love cooking different types of food specifically. I
Hmm.
think Hanukkah is a fun example, just because the idea is it's a holiday based on like light and oil, and therefore there's a lot of fried things, and anything that you make that's fried counts. So I'll make potato latkes, but also fried chicken, or also fried donuts or churros, or whatever like people in the family like. Whenever we do what is it, Passover, there's a book I just got from this chef who's black and Jewish named Michael Twitty, and he has a whole section in his book. He has two books. One's called The Cooking Gene, and one's called Kosher Soul.
Hmm.
And the Kosher Soul is awesome because it tells you a whole bunch of different ways that like different folks all over the world make stuff. So
Yeah.
we got together recently and we made we read what the dish, we didn't make everything from the book obviously, but like we read what the dishes could be. And we'll always try to say like, oh, here's a new tradition. I think that the fact that our traditions always keep evolving is
Yeah.
nice, because everyone's together and everybody's open to learning more about everybody else and celebrating each other. And if someone comes from out of town, we'll try to take a tradition from like where they're from and fit that into what we're all doing together. just, you know, I'm just thinking about like when I was a kid, every year, not just for my birthday, but you know, there's lots of things that we just do all the time. My dad would make really good barbecue chicken, and everybody would come over and always be very excited for that specific recipe.
Hmm.
Or for Passover, my mom makes, or not, yeah, Passover. My mom makes really good matzo ball soup, so she's the one in the family she's going to make that matzo ball soup, and everyone's expecting that
Nice.
soup's going to be there, you know. So just those things that you love when you're a kid, and they continue, or you learn how to cook those things, and you know, that's always, you know, the food traditions. And I think food is like, I think about food like art all the time. People make
Hmm.
it, and then you consume it, and it makes you feel a certain way, it makes you
Yeah.
react, change, and you grow and you learn, and that's like what I like about art too. I almost wanted to be a chef before I decided that I liked animation. I still love cooking, so
Yeah.
sharing food is like the best.
Yeah. Definitely.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
with like growing up, not really religious, but still culturally like Jewish, what things today do you keep from like your culture that is like, you know, you're not religious, but there's still these important like tenets that you kind of follow?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not going to stay on holidays the whole time, but just to go back to the holidays, you know, we
Hmm.
still go to grandma's house every year. Everyone still makes it a point to go for holidays, and we keep those traditions, you know, pretty similar. She's in the same house she was in when I was a kid, so it's
Hmm.
very, you know, the those moments continue. Some things I like about, you know, just like, because I always think that Jewish identity is interesting, because it's like, there's an ethnicity, but not everybody that's ethnically Jewish, and there's
Yeah.
a religion, but not everybody's religiously Jewish, and there's all
Yeah.
these different different ways.
Right.
But you know, one thing I really like is there's a phrase of, and maybe you've heard it, of what is it like, if you put two Jews together, you'll get three opinions. Uh, and that's something that I definitely take to heart. I like that it's a culture that encourages people to think differently and to
Hmm.
try differently and problem solve, and not just take something for granted, but say, I don't like that, uh, and why, and ask questions, and be open to learning, and that's
Yeah.
something I think is really important to me. Sorry, I just want to say, sometimes people are
Yeah.
down not to ask any questions at all, and that's always like troubling to me.
Yeah. There's like this book called The Humble Inquiry
Hmm.
that talks about this, where our society is very much centered around telling and not asking.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I was on Threads yesterday, and like this woman asked like, what do men mean when they say they got a lot going on? And and there was like funny, you know, answers to that. But this one guy was like, it means that they got a lot going on. Why are we always being like questioned? I was like, actually, it's good that somebody's asking the question. It gives you a voice to
Yeah,
say
absolutely.
what your version of it is. Like, it's kind.
Hmm.
I find it really weird that people sometimes even get offensive when questions are being asked. So, or
I know
offended. Sorry.
yeah, there's something that's like, it's nice when someone asks a question or has it, like, I like when people have different opinions, because it lets you figure out why you think what you think. You know, if everyone's just
Yeah.
like, yep, that sounds good, you're like, yep, and then you forget why you even thought that.
Yeah. So I'm a highly inquisitive person. So I have a front seat to being people getting like highly offended when you ask questions. I'm like, I actually just really want to know
Right. Yeah. I
like
remember being a
things.
kid, and sometimes people would think you're being like a smart ass or something because you're asking a question. You're like, I just trying to understand it. And the context that you had before, whatever you said when you're a kid, you don't know how to say all those things. But you're like,
Yeah.
but you know that the pieces that have been presented to you aren't enough pieces for that to actually make sense. And you're like, I just want it to make sense. So this is just what's missing for me. Can you just tell me? And some people are like, why you gotta know? Why you have to ask? And
Yeah.
but if you're comfortable with it, just answer it. What's the problem? Unless you also don't know.
Yeah. There was another post on Threads that I saw yesterday where the person is neurodivergent and they're like, why don't like neurotypical people ask questions? I'm like, it's not really a neurotypical thing, it's a societal thing, because if you think of children, they always ask questions no matter what
Mhm.
like neurological
Mhm, mhm.
makeup
Absolutely.
they have. So it's not really neurodivergent versus neurotypical. It's just like we're kind of conditioned not to ask questions anymore.
Yeah, I feel like there's that, there's all those classic sayings of like a child is seen and not heard, and all those kinds of
Mhm.
things like that. And I feel like when you're a kid and and someone's like, oh, we got to do this, and you're like, why? And they're like, because of this. And you're like, why? And eventually someone's like, hey, stop! Like, this is just what we're doing. I don't want to tell you any more answers. And it's like,
Yeah.
this is just a small being who's trying to understand what's going on in this place where everything is new every day. Like, of course, we're trying to but then you get older and you feel like you figured enough out, and then you stop asking questions. So you're like, I got this. And then it's like, no. It's still a big, we don't even know what's at the bottom of the ocean. Like, hold on a second.
Yeah. And then for your like cultural makeup, because in certain aspects of Black American culture, particularly in the South, asking a question is rude. So
For
like,
sure.
we're seen as like, if you're a child, it's seen as like being defiant or something like that.
Yeah, and I think, like, there's times and places, and learning to read the room is important. Like,
Hmm.
maybe it's not the right time when everyone else is sitting around the table doing something to interrupt someone, and just be like, hey, like, I'm going to derail your conversation so you can answer
Yeah.
this thing just for me right now. But there's Google, there's the library, there's places that you can go to learn stuff. There's
Hmm.
times when maybe someone who's not approachable is more approachable because they're in a comfortable spot that's not
Yeah.
putting them on the spot. You can't just, it's just like being in school, right? You can't just yell out a question just
Hmm.
because you feel like asking it. You still have to raise your hand, and the teacher comes to you so you can still get your answer, but you have to understand who you're talking to. That's like the first thing I think to learn.
Yeah. When I lived in the South, because I'm from the North, which
Mhm,
I
mhm.
don't even identify as a Northerner, but be living in the South, you have to because
Yeah.
apparently it's offensive. But like I'm from a place where we're just like really direct,
Mhm, mhm.
and so I didn't really like living in the South because being direct, even if you're not being rude, is rude. And
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
so it's just like a lot of some a lot of Southern culture is being coy and like dancing around the point,
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
and it's like
mhm.
really annoying. But yeah.
Have you seen that map that someone did where it's like the four quadrants of the US, and there's the South, the West, the East, and the
Hmm.
North.
Hmm.
And it says, what is it? The East Coast is axe mean is nice. The South is axe nice is mean. And then like the West Coast is like axe nice is mean. And then like the North is like axe nice is nice.
Yes, I've seen those. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like,
And
okay, it's not
I
true
feel
for
like even
everybody,
before
but
that map, like because I've lived in like I'm from the Midwest, on the East Coast,
Mhm, mhm,
South. I
mhm.
lived in the South and now in the West. Like I kind of analyze different, like cultural norms, and it's like, yeah, I
Mhm,
understand
mhm.
that.
Yeah, because like you'll be out here in California, and like, you'll be talking to someone, and they're like, yeah, 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 I'll send you that email, I'll connect you with so and so, I'll make all this stuff happen. And then like you leave, and that person never follows through. You're like, well, that was kind of
Yeah,
mean, even though they were very nice about it when I was talking to them. They
yeah.
didn't do anything they said.
Yeah, when I first moved to LA, you know how in our culture, like in American culture, if you ask someone how are you, it's kind of like a throwaway question now. Like you might not care,
Mhm,
but
mhm,
in
mhm.
LA or at least Hollywood, I'll say because I kind of differentiate between LA and Hollywood,
As
and
you
so in
should, as
Hollywood,
everyone should.
in Hollywood, it would be like a couple people were like, yeah, like come to the studio. And I was unemployed, and so I was like, I have plenty of time, so just let me know when I can come to the studio. And then they
Mhm,
never
mhm.
followed through. And I'm like, is this how are you in like Hollywood? Like because
That,
like why?
that totally, that's the same as like, let's get coffee sometime, or yeah, we'll
Hmm.
grab lunch. And then unless you like pound on that door every
Yeah.
day until someone's finally hungry, it's like you ain't getting lunch.
And then the culture shock of like me making plans with somebody who's like originally from New York City, and like the idea was like tossed out, and then in the same conversation we actually made plans, and on my end I'm like, wait, are we actually doing this right now, like in real time? Like we're making the plans. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so new as like since I've moved here.
No, I know what you mean. And I think like I think everyone has the best intention. I think
Yeah.
generally everyone's like, yeah, it'd be fun to have lunch. Like if you were right there talking to someone right then and lunch was right here, they're going to sit down and they'll have that lunch and you'll
Yeah.
talk the whole time. But then, getting around the city's tough in general. And also everyone is saying that to everybody constantly. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden they look at their calendar and they're like, oh, I've got all these things. And they're like, what are you doing in September? And you're like, well, in September, I'm going to a friend's wedding. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll see you in 2025.
Yeah. I think
Everybody's busy.
I think I learned from a recent, like, I go to these meetups, and something a guy said like last week was he kept saying yes to people, but it was actually
Mhm.
bad time management. Like,
Yeah,
because
I hear that.
it was just like you just say yes to everybody, and then you realize that you can't fit it in with everything you have to do in life. And so it's like actually the core of the issue is like just bad time management and not acknowledging that you did, and like people who can't say no. So
Right. Because you don't be like, "Oh, I get lunch." I'm like, no, I'm busy forever. Like, even if it's true,
yeah.
it's like, well, that seems pretty rude. So you got to be like, yeah, of course, that sounds great, and then you
Yeah.
hopefully follow through on it, or everybody just understands the context of it is next time I see you, I'm going to be excited to see you. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to say something that means that we're on good terms. Don't feel weird next time you see me because I'm willing to get together, but we're not going to get that on the calendar because
Yeah.
you live over in downtown and you live over in Culver City, and like
Yeah.
I don't know when that's going to happen.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
what has been the journey, or what was the journey in art and animation in your childhood?
Yeah, I mean, I love making things like I said before a little bit. I just have always loved making stuff, whether it's cooking, whether it's doing some arts and crafts. And no one in my family is really in the film industry at
Hmm.
all, or in the animation industry.
Hmm.
um, but I remember being a kid and seeing like Wallace and Gromit and seeing that before Christmas, and even seeing things like the bug and Men in Black, and just like things that were
Yeah.
just cool and neat, and being like, wow, that's awesome, how do you do that? And then you see some behind the scenes somewhere of something of someone with a camera and someone's got like a animatronic dinosaur, or if I were like, how do I make that? Like someone's doing that. And I think that I don't know what it's like for kids right now growing up where so many things are CG and it's not as tangible, but
Yeah.
seeing thumbprints on toys. I remember seeing Aladdin one time on a big screen, and the scene where he lifts up the lamp, over the lava pool. When you watch it on a regular TV, it looks so perfect. It looks
Hmm.
so smooth, and the sizes, everything stays together frame to frame to frame. But I remember seeing like maybe it was just like a sequence on an IMAX screen, and I could see like his arm wiggle a little bit because the perfectionism wasn't necessarily made for an IMAX screen. It's drawn by
Yeah.
hand, a pencil so thick. There's only so much perfectionism, even if you're the best artist ever doing that scene. There's only so perfect that you can get it. And I still remember seeing that and being like, oh, it's someone's drawing that. It's not
Yeah.
Aladdin. It's moving drawings, and the fact that you can put a bunch of drawings together and then make a flip book.
Yeah.
This is so silly. I drew this the other day. It's probably gonna get blurry. But it's a little, I'll put it right in front of my face. It's a little bear saying hi on this fan. And then when you go like
Nice.
this, it's a little bear in the corner and he's just saying bye. But like I just love the idea that it's written on the edges of the paper. So
Hmm.
it gets to change into something different. And I just like silly things like that. So I got this. It's funny. I did a music. I was a neighbor down the block
Hmm.
asked if I wanted to be a little kid in the background of a movie that's kind of like a Disney Channel movie. I can't
Hmm.
remember what it's called right now, but they were going to pay $200, and I knew that a camera, like a video camera, I think it was maybe a high 8 camera,
Hmm.
that could record quarter of a frame exposures was also $200. And I hate dancing, and I don't like really being in front of the camera at all. But I said to my mom, like, I'm going to go do that. And then I use that money. I'll send you the video. I have it somewhere on my computer. And I got the camera, and then I just spent every afternoon after school, every evening, every weekend just making stuff out of clay or out of paper, and taping my camera to the back of a chair and making a down shooter, and just being fascinated that you just can move stuff in it and it comes to life. Or you go in the backyard with your friends from a movie and you spray the hose off camera, and now you're filming a scene in the rain, and like all that stuff is just fun. And knowing that people just make stuff, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to make stuff all the time. And this is an industry where like a script doesn't exist unless someone makes stuff, and animation doesn't exist unless someone makes stuff. Like none of that is going to be here unless everybody is collectively making it out of just like ideas and what you see in your head, and you hope that like what you convince someone else to do turns out a result that like makes everyone work together. It's just cool, and I want to always do that.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, if I had multiple lifetimes, there's like all various things I would do outside of animation, but in animation, like a Foley artist seems like a pretty cool job.
I love watching Foley. And did you ever go to Universal Studios when they used to have the special effects stage? No.
I've only been to Universal to like, I haven't been to Universal. Like I've been like to the promenade, like the area.
Oh, City Walk and everything. Okay. Well, they don't have it there anymore, but they used to have this thing called the special effects stage, and you could go through it, and it was like a show, but the audience would get up and move to different rooms every like 10 minutes. Nice. And one of them was a Foley demonstration, and you got to go up there with other kids who were there, and you could like bang the coconuts together to make like the horse hooves, and you could do all that. And that was always really, I've never done it professionally, but it was fun to do at Universal Studios.
Yeah. That's cool. So were your parents supportive of your artistic interests?
Yeah, absolutely. My mom was and still continues to be an art teacher. So from that side, we always had art supplies in the house and everything. But both my parents were totally supportive. They both were very much of the mindset of like, whatever you want to do, just put your all into doing it as best you can. So it was never like you've got to be a doctor or you've got to be a lawyer, and I'm like defiant or something. It was I want to do this, and I was putting the time in. I was trying to be dancing in a video to get a camera. Like I was ready to do things to get what I needed to get so I could make my thing. And they were always happy. Like my dad once bought me so much clay. And it's so hard to do claymation in the valley because it gets so hot. And then you're filming in, and you've got to block out the windows because the light can't change. So it gets even hotter in the house. And I remember I even got like a little mini fridge, and I could shoot like 3 frames. And then I have to take everything and put it in the fridge for like 2 hours. And then I could do it because otherwise it would just start to droop. Well, that was always really fun. And they were always really, really happy to, help me get the materials I needed or whatever. And then we'd all, I'd play in the living room and family came over and we'd all be like, oh, that's fun. Like it wasn't like I was making stuff for film festivals.
When I was in college, I had, I think a couple stop motion classes, but you can see in one of my videos, you can see me pretty much doing my assignment last minute because like in the corner there's a window and you can see it turn from night to day because I stayed up all night doing my like stop motion.
That was me in senior year. I wasn't doing stop motion, but I was working on my thesis film, and I was trying to do a 2D film, and I wanted to make a film that was 7 minutes long, and I was like, I'm so easily distracted if people are talking to me. So I was like, I'm going to go into the animation studio at like 1 p.m. every day, but I'm going to stay all the way through to like 7 a.m. And then I'm going to go back and sleep at 7. And that way, like I'll have the majority of my working time when nobody's sitting there and can distract me. And it was such a bad idea. It all worked. I finished the film, but the amount of stress, like if I move my shoulder, it still cracks like from doing this thesis film because I overextended myself way too much. But I wanted to be doing it. And I feel like in animation, every night can be an all-nighter if you feel like it. Like the potential exists to never stop.
If you love it.
I used to spend, I remember once I was at a summer program and I stayed up all night long animating a bouncing ball sequence, and the ball just bounced, and then it rolled off the page, and the next page came in, and it was a different location. The ball's going here, and it's a different location. It's top down. The ball's going, and it was like 200 frames, and I just stayed up all night long and I didn't have any transparency, so I had to redraw the background in every single frame too. But it was fun. I wanted to do it, and then it was just exciting to do, and the thrill of being like, and then tomorrow I get to go to the down shooter and shoot it and see if it comes out right, see if the timing's right, and that was always cool. I always loved doing that.
Yeah. So this is the part where I list some projects that you've worked on. I'm not gonna list everyone, but you worked on a whole slew of untolds.
Yes.
One that pops for me because I lived in New Orleans is Leah Chase, because Dookie Chase, and she's like very popular in New Orleans. So that was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Disney Comics in Motion, Lego Toy Story Forks Rescue, The Little Mermaid Retold, Mini Bobot Robot.
Yep.
Disney Draw Me a Story with both Bill Farmer and Angela Bassett. And then your claim to fame, Blewish.
Oh, yep.
Ariel Mermaid Tales and Disney Junior's Ariel. There was I saw somewhere also that mentioned there was like an article that mentioned like Key and Peele, The Good Wife, and Outlander. What is the context of those?
Then I'll go back to the others because there's fun stuff from some of the projects that you mentioned too. But I did when I was doing my senior thesis film, I totally fell in love with using After Effects, and I think it's just like the best software. I don't use it as much now, just in my current job, but I used to. There was like rarely a day that I wasn't doing something in After Effects. Nice. It was like, like painting rigs out, copying a character, doing something with green screen. Like I've always just loved that software, and I had worked at a startup animation studio for a little while that nobody would hear of because it was a startup and we didn't end up making anything. It was a cool place, but it didn't make anything ultimately. And after that, I was just a little burned out on the companies and being at big companies. So I wanted to do more, just making stuff and being able to focus on, quality of making something myself. And I worked at two different visual effects studios, and I did visual effects comping on all of those shows with a team. It wasn't just me, of course. But like we did a ton of stuff in Key and Peele. The first thing that's coming to me right now is the episode. I forget which episode it is. It's a while ago, but it's the one where they're all football players and they're all And I did like when like they throw the knife through the cloud of smoke, and when he holds up his phone and it has like the bomb timer on it, and in Silicon Valley I got to do a lot of the computer screen burn-ins that they have.
Nice.
And something I really loved about it was I got to design what everyone's monitors looked like. And since you don't want, so everything's copyright, you can't have Gmail on there. You can't have Microsoft Word. You can't have those things. So I would sit in Photoshop and I would just build like, this is the email browser that they're using in, Key and Peele, not Key and Peele, in Silicon Valley. And so if you look through, if it's ever high res enough, you might see my name on like one of those emails in there, and and then sometimes there'd be other things that would come in, like someone has lighting on them that's really harsh and it's making like all these wrinkles look crazy, and you gotta like do something to bring it down a little bit. Or we had some interesting stuff on some shows that I won't say specific which shows, but like there'd be things where like someone might need a scar on them that like the makeup team had gotten in the wrong spot, or someone had their hair dyed because they came back to do reshoots, but they were already on the next project, or someone's got a little tag that's visible on their shirt, and and you want to fix those things up, but you've got to match the noise, you've got to match the color, you've got to match everything, whether you're making a piece in Photoshop or you're copying something from the frame over. Ultimately, like no one should see what those effects are, and that was always really fun. I know people are like, don't get enough value in visual effects, as we all know, but the thrill of visual effects being no one should know. Like, obviously you see a giant
Yeah.
dinosaur, you know there's not a giant dinosaur around, but like it should feel like it's supposed to be there. And when you pull that off, it's very satisfying and fun.
Yeah. Yeah, like, because people, the laymen, like, think they like hate, visual effects or CG or whatever, and it's like, you hate bad, like
Yeah,
CG and bad
exactly.
visual effects.
I once saw a behind the scenes reel from Ugly Betty. I'm sure it's still on YouTube. And there's this scene where she's walking down the street in New York and she bumps into, a phone booth. And then she's like going down the street and she's like frazzled. And then they cut to, and the whole thing besides the phone booth is a green screen. And I'm just like, this is, it's not Boardwalk Empire. It's a regular primetime comedy show that
Yeah.
you don't think has the budget to be doing something like that. But then you're like, wow. And it's just cool.
Yeah, it is. So, what about some of the other projects that were mentioned that you want to talk about?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say the Untolds were really, really, really fun. I loved working on the Untolds. They all had very fast production schedules, which was a challenge because there's a lot of animation that happens in them. And each one of them got to be a unique challenge because when we were developing what that series was, it was very hard to figure out what the mark of the series is, where it's the same series from episode to episode. Because we did one that was supporting Leah Chase, for example, in support of Princess and the Frog, since she's one of the inspirations for Princess Tiana. And we did one with Giancarlo Esposito for The Mandalorian as Moff Gideon. And we did one for Soul, and we did one for one of the first ones we did, which was co-directed with my friend Jackie Chang, was for Moana, and Jackie did all the visuals for that one. And we did one for Cars 3. And these are all totally different properties. And you can't say this is the visual style we're going to use, because one of them is going to go up on the Pixar channel, one of them is going to go up on the Disney channel, one of them is going to go up on the Star Wars channel. And, and it doesn't, and they're not going to live all together in the same space, even though they're the same series. So every single one of them, we got to build a big mood board where I would think of like all the things that made me feel like what I got from that show or that movie, as opposed to saying we're doing that. Because again, we're not going to render it in the style of Moana, for a 2-minute video. That's going to be impossible. And it has to be budget friendly and time friendly. But we want to do something that when you watch it, it's Cars, it's Star Wars. The style serves what we're doing here. But it's not the same style, so that if you're doing a kid's property versus an adult property, one doesn't look too old and one doesn't look too young. And that was really, really, really just fun. Every episode was like a brand new challenge, and a lot of them are working with the same artists or same studios, and it was always really fun to meet up with those studios and go, okay, we're doing the next one, and the next one's going to be like this. And then they'd be excited too, because they didn't have to do the same thing they did last time. So everybody got to do something brand new. Even though the formatting was always the same: intro, title card, 3 sections of story, intercut with the footage like we were doing here. They all turn out so different. And that was really, really, really neat, and just a fun challenge to always go, how are we going to try to outdo that last one? But it's a shorter production schedule this time.
It's like, who'd have thunk? Creatives like being creative. Like,
exactly.
That's what I think about, like the AI conversation where they're like, oh, but you can get things done quicker. Like, no artist cares about getting things done quicker. Like,
no, there's
art because we like it.
Yeah, there's like little details that you might want to be done quicker, but you don't want to take out the fun of designing, discovering, figuring it out, the parts that don't work and how we're going to make them work. And that's why all of us do it, is because we want to do it. No one needs film or animation. We all enjoy it a lot, but everyone who makes it because they want to. No one's saying you have to. You better get an animation. Like, no one's doing that. I don't think there's a parent in the world that's been like, you need to be an animator. You better be a lighting technician. Like, you do that because you like doing that and you want to show what's in your head.
And that's mostly just because like parents haven't figured out how much you can make in different jobs, like the high paying ones, they would, if they knew, they would be like, yes.
Yeah.
But they keep thinking of the starving artist, so it's like,
Exactly.
go be a doctor.
You could be doing anything in animation that's not drawing, and the only questions everyone's going to ask you is, "Oh, so you draw?"
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is great if you do, but so many people in animation don't.
Yeah.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg of what this entire industry is.
You kind of already covered it in what you were just saying, but what do you love about animation?
I mean, there's so many things I love. I'll even talk about for a second that Disney Motion Comics project, which was a really small project in a way. We had all these books from Disney Publishing. They wanted to put them on social media and animate them. And so that's what we were up to. We were just taking them as motion graphics, and we were just changing these. But they were all based on they weren't the stories from the original Disney films, but they were like, supplemental stories of, here's Tiana with a gumbo contest. Here's Ariel learning how to play an instrument under the sea. It's like extension stories from the properties. And as we were working on them, it was a really simple project, but all of a sudden, the teams that wanted us to make those got really excited about them and said, like, hey, these are comics. There's a lot of text on screen because that's all dialogue. Let's have the text read out loud on screen. And we went back and forth of, do we just hire a narrator who does, like a book on tape, like one person's doing the whole thing. But then we were able to figure out getting the entire cast, exceptions being some people weren't available and some people, had passed away since their movies had come out, because these movies span a lot of time, but we were able to I got to go into the booth with like the cast of Aladdin and the cast of Beauty and the Beast and the cast of Little Mermaid and or whoever their closest current actor is, whether it's someone from Kingdom Hearts or the TV shows, and being able just to do a project that felt like such a small project that was fun at the beginning, that got to become something of, now I'm working even just for a small minute with all of these people, like we did one with Princess and the Frog, and that whole cast came through, and being able just to record them, and they were also excited to come and do more with their characters, and we were also excited because it added another layer of meaningful value to what we were doing too, from a company perspective, being asked to do it, and from a viewer perspective of someone at home listens and that's Jodie Benson doing that Ariel there, and that was just the joy of seeing everybody working together on something that could be neglected in a small project, but everyone said, let's make it really, really special. And that's what I think about animation in general. It's like we were saying a second ago, you can keep going as much as you want. If you want to add more frames, you want to add more detail, you want to make another exciting shot, you want to try something cool with lighting, like you look at into Across the Spider-Verse, and the way each one of those universes just holistically trusts what it wants to do, and you get to enjoy that, and technology gets better that lets us start, like you look at The Last Wish or The Wild Robot coming out, or things that are pushing you. When Shrek came out, or Toy Story came out, or Ants came out, we were like, dang, that's what CG can do, this is awesome. And now you're like, this is what we're able to do here. You look at Paperman a bunch of years ago when that came out, and the fact that people still get to innovate and still get to figure out something new, and the idea is something that gets an artist excited to draw, and or gets an actor excited to read a line, or design a new voice for a character, or a composer comes in and now they see what's there and they go, that's what that scene makes me feel like. And again, it's all stuff that no one has to do. No one's forcing anyone to do it.
Right.
And everyone just gets so excited to be able to add their voice collectively. It's so rare that you haven't animated anything that one person just did all of and more power to them, because it's cool when you can do that. But it's naturally a community driven craft, and that's just so special,
Yeah. A question that had popped into my head, because there's so many conversations going on right now, and like around like independent animation and and you have produced an independent animation, and so
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
we're kind of aware that like sometimes to be an artist is not to be a business person and to
Mm-hmm,
know how
mm-hmm,
to like
mm-hmm.
market things. So when you did work in marketing, what things did you learn that might be beneficial to like independent people that they can maybe start doing to market their ideas?
Yeah, for sure. I think like there's a couple of things that I think about immediately when you're asking. The first one is making a schedule. You got to make a schedule, whether you want
Mm-hmm.
to or not, whether you hate schedules, whether you hate deadlines. If you don't have a schedule, it's never going to get done.
Yeah.
And the shorter the schedule, the better, because if you're doing something indie, it's going to take longer. Um, when I made Blewish, we made that. It took about a year and a month, I would say, from when the first draft of the script was done to when that short was done. And that short is 4.5 minutes long,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a 2D short. It's not trying to blow you out of the water visually. It's trying to tell a story, and
Yeah.
it's trying to do almost children's book style graphics to tell a story in a set amount of time. And if I had 15 times the budget and resources that I had for that, that could have been done in 4 weeks. Like, and that's something that when you start doing something indie, how many characters are you going to have on screen? What are those characters doing? How can you limit motion to and shot count to make sure that you're using everything to tell the story? Because everyone has their idea that they're like, this is my series. It's going to be 9 episodes, or it's going to be 30 episodes, and each one they're going to go on a new adventure. And it's like, that's an awesome idea. But that the amount of resources I think that it takes to go to do something like that is astronomical. It's so hard. And if you're trying to make something yourself and you want to see it all the way through, I think the most important thing is what's the story that you want to tell. And
Yeah.
it's not, oh, I want to make 50 episodes of a fun mystery adventure, because that's just made, like, TV used to be made to run ads. So of course we're making 50 episodes of the mystery adventure so they can get 50 weeks of ads on.
Yeah.
And that will pay for what they're doing. That's paying everybody. But if you're making your thing, what's your story? And now, how economical can you be to tell that story? And like when you look at movies, like you look at Beauty and the Beast, you look at Beauty and the Beast has a bunch of extra incidental characters throughout it. But you look at Aladdin, you look at Little Mermaid, you look at a lot of the classic Disney movies, even like you look at Shrek, you look at lots of movies from studios that have big, impressive looking movies. It's the first Despicable Me. And then when you look closely, those movies usually have like 5 characters in them. There's not a lot going on. They're like 5 characters.
Mm-hmm.
There's Jafar, the Sultan, Jasmine, the genie, obviously Aladdin, and then you've got like Yago and Abu, who are there a little bit of the time. And sure,
Yeah.
there's guards in moments, there's people here and there in shots, but that movie knows how to be economical, where you don't even ask yourself, why is there no one else in a palace that's 4 times the size of Agrabah? Like, each scene just makes you
Yeah.
feel like who needs to be there is there. The story is getting me there. I don't need
Yeah.
all this extra stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing with making indie productions is you need to make sure that everybody is getting something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't just show up and be like an auteur and expect everyone to like, bend over backwards, like you're paying them so much money that they don't need to have a feeling about it at all. Like,
Yeah.
you're getting people who are coming in who are almost always working for a reduced rate or volunteering their time. And
Yeah.
if you've got someone who's a great animator, let them animate the character the way they want to do it. It's going to keep them on the project longer. It's going to make a better result. It's going to make a better team camaraderie where you can work together on something in the future, probably again. If you have a composer, let them write the music that they want to write. If people feel like they're able to look at what your story is and add what they take from your story to it, instead of just doing what you're dictating them to
Yeah.
do, it's going to take you so much further, and it's going to be
Yeah.
a better product at the end.
Yeah. That's what I've thought about. Like, allowing the creatives you hired to work in their expertise as opposed to being your like minions.
Yeah, you get like some incredible art director who's been tired of working on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but they're willing to work on your project for a little bit. Let them do all the things that they don't feel like they get to do in their regular job. And they're going to
Yeah.
be thrilled. Even if they get another full-time job while they're working on it, they'll probably want to decompress by expressing themselves their way at the end of the day on a
Yeah.
project that both of you are going to have your name on, that everybody gets to feel good about. People got to put credits on things. When you finish making an indie thing, you've got to make sure everybody who worked on it has access to it so they can use it in their reel. And so everyone needs to feel equally proud of it. No one's the boss. No one is the studio executive making that happen. It's a collective effort, and I feel like you need to treat it that way from the start to the end.
Yeah. Another thing that popped into my head as you were talking is like I haven't done anything practically really yet, but theoretically I have like this idea. Because I'm a 3D modeler, even though I go by BlkWmnAnimator. This
You
is
can do
for
more
the
than one
other
thing.
these are for the name is for other people, not for me. But I'm not like our peers where I have like all these like animated ideas. My ideas are mostly like 3D models, but
Sure.
one animation idea that I do have is called Road Rage, from my time driving in Louisiana. But something that I've very purposely thought, even though I haven't put it to like practice yet, is like, okay, I used to watch this YouTube channel called Guy Moments, where it was like a 2D animated web series about anything guys would complain women do, like not choosing a restaurant and stuff like that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I know what you mean.
So it was like really good, but it's just like 2D animation and it's independent, so it kind of fell off. Or like even when they were still doing it, it would be like 6 months between episodes. So for my idea, because my idea is a web series idea, I was like, okay, what style could I do that's simple enough where I could possibly do it myself? Like what style of the characters could be very simple? Like what process could I take? Like there's character animate, like Adobe character
Yeah,
animator that allows you to put the like puppets in. So I'm like, what process could I use? So it's like, it's not just like having the idea, but like how could I approach this where I won't end up like Guy Moments, where I could like produce things at high enough a clip where I could just like get out episodes. Because I have like something that I did have practically done is like I started recording my woes driving, and so I have over 500 recordings of like ideas. Now if I can make them funny, I don't know, I'm not a writer, but like I am very purposely thinking of like what can the approach be to be as simple as possible so I don't like set myself up for failure.
Sure. I mean, when it comes to a series and independent work, right? I always think that that's really tough, because you want to keep making them, you want to keep making them, but also sometimes life gets in the way.
Yeah.
And anything that comes with that, where all of a sudden you're like, no, I can't, but you feel like you feels like you've created an expectation, even though not necessarily anybody's out there being like, I need to see that next episode. It's like Game of Thrones on a Sunday in season 3. Like, but I think, if you want to make a series, like you need to, I would say, know what you want to do with each episode first. And you want to know why they're different and why you want to see it through besides just making multiple, but if they're all different enough, make one, see how that goes, start the next one after that, take the learnings from it, and see, like if you look at those two Draw Me a Stories that you mentioned before, one of them has a whole team on it, one of them has 2 artists on it. You can't really tell between which 2. The style is consistent here and there, but there's a few differences in each one, and they both turned out really good, but they weren't made in a close proximity. One of them was made first, one of them was made second, but the second one was made when the time came around to make it. It wasn't like we better get one of these out next week. It was, oh, now we're going to make this one, and this is what we're going to put into it. And even though it's a series, it's 2 episodes of the series, but it's,
Yeah.
you know, it was each one of them was an intentional production, and it wasn't, you know, you don't want to just feel like now you're beholden to something that's not paying you. If you're making an indie project and now you got to sit there and grind out episodes forever, that's when people stop making them. They just fall by the wayside. But if you make a good one, and then, you know, you make another good one, or you have the recording and you ask another artist, why don't you make an episode? Like, if it's who wants to do one of these, they're 45 seconds long, they're fun stories, you know, there's no deadline, but if you want to do one, this is what I'm thinking, but put your experience into that and maybe make it into a community thing.
And that was another key, that my idea is to have 30 to 60-second episodes, not like minutes long.
Yes, and that's always important too. That's how you can actually get it done.
Yeah. Because I learned the hard way getting, I originally was supposed to get a BFA in film and animation from my university, and I ended up getting a Bachelor of Science in Multidisciplinary Studies because I got behind on my 1/4 film, because like there were like 3 teachers teaching the 1/4 film, and I didn't want to go to the like mean teacher, and so I picked my professor, and he didn't like the other 2 professors gave like do 30 seconds, and so he didn't do that. I actually ended up taking the class 3 times, and then I just was like, if I want to do a 2/4 film and then a thesis film, I would have to be a 5th-year senior, and my dad is sending twins to school, so, and I decided to pick an expensive school, so I'm out. Like, I'm like, animation, don't care about degrees, so I'm just gonna get a Bachelor of Science. Like,
I know, because every job you apply to now, they're like, let me see that diploma first.
Right, yeah. So I just was like, I needed guardrails when I did that, and because it ended up being like 2 minutes, which, you know, to people who have never created like an animated film, they're like, oh, 2 minutes. I'm just like, no, 2 minutes is a long time when you're doing it by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, right? Is everybody wants to do a long thing. That's what I was saying about that thesis film too. I was like, I'm gonna do 7 minutes. It's gonna be the longest film. Everyone's gonna be like, whoa. And then, you know, people like it. They would have liked it if it was 1 minute.
Yeah.
It probably would have been better if it was 1 minute. Like the animation would have been better, because all those resources and time could have fit into a specific amount. And I think that's always the challenge. And you know, no one all really says it outright, but when you look at a frame, right, of animation, you can usually tell. You can usually tell so much of what is going on. You get lighting that sets a mood and a tone and a time of day. It's like, is this person feeling this way in the morning or the evening? It gives you a different feeling. You know, and the way that colors can convey, oh, it's making me feel angry for this character, and then you have the expression on the character. Then you have what the character's wearing, which sets their class, their location, their, you know, their cultural background, depending on what's on the amount of things that can fit into one frame is incredible. And when someone can take a story, someone writes a script, and someone says, let me get a 1 sheet from that script, and they go, I don't know how to write this into a 1 sheet. It's a whole script. But you can figure out how to tell that story also in 1 sentence to someone running down the street, or 1 page, so someone doesn't have to trust you enough to spend however long it takes that person to read 90 pages. Like, you can convey ideas quickly. That's what's most fun about TikTok, back when Vine was around, you know, Instagram Reels, when you get all the information in a just right at the top, you know what the premise is, you know what the context is of the story you're seeing within the first 5 seconds. Oh, this is a story about this. And then the next 30 seconds just enrich that or prove the point. You don't need to do more unless you just really want to. And then half the time, that's when you watch those films and you're like, dang, this is a bloated film. Even if it's like 2 minutes long, you're like, that could have been 1 minute long.
That's what I think about. Like, I'm kind of like an advocate these days for like micro content. And so something that I came to by thinking about it was like, you know, people are sometimes trying to recreate the feeling that they got when they watched Aladdin or like Beauty and the Beast or something like that. But when you watch a 30-second TikTok, you get a feeling as well. So like, you can give people those feelings just in a shorter amount of time, and it's cost effective for you because animation is expensive. Like,
and you look at the you know, at the Disney movies, all the way from the 20s to the late 90s, and some of those movies are, you know, I think the 2011 Winnie Pooh is 87 minutes or 67 minutes long. It's It's not that long, you know. And you look at Aladdin, you look at Beauty and the Beast; those are all 120 with credits on them.
Yeah.
And then you see, you see a movie that, that's longer, and sometimes like the efficiency of how Aladdin is told, every single scene, there is a way the character feels at the beginning of the scene, there's a way the
Mm-hmm.
character feels at the end of the scene,
Mm-hmm.
and they change. And if there's multiple characters in that scene, they all have a different thought from the beginning to the end, and then you're in the next beat and you watch them do it again until the character arcs are completed, and then it's over.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, we did that now. And then you watch other movies, sometimes they're remakes of movies, sometimes they're, and they want to justify, here's how we're going to do it differently this time.
Mm-hmm.
And the efficiency, when you can tell that something isn't being efficient, you start, you're tapping your desk, you're wondering, like, why is that here? Like, now maybe I'll go get a snack. Like, if when you, like, you don't even pause Aladdin when you watch Aladdin, you
Yeah.
just watch it. And it's not like you go, oh, it's late, I'm not going to put Aladdin on. You could say it's 11 o'clock and I'll be in bed by 12:30. Like, I still have time for Aladdin right
Yeah.
now. And you feel like you've learned that entire universe of Agrabah by the time that movie is over. You
Yeah.
feel like you know every street and everybody in that place. It's like a familiar place that now you visit when you watch the movie again. And that's
Yeah.
just such efficient storytelling, and a lot of those are because they can't spend that much money on filler. They need to make sure every scene, every frame, every framing and silhouette is so clear. It's so impressive to like study that and appreciate that.
Yeah. Let's see. Just time check. Okay.
Hmm.
So you've had like a very varied career. If you go to your LinkedIn page,
Fair enough.
and you've dibbled and dabbled in like many areas. So like,
Hmm.
what was that transition from, like, I know you kind of originally wanted to be like a character animator at some point to, and now you're a producer. Like,
Hmm.
what? How did you get to where you are now?
Sure. I think that producing was always natural to me, because whether it's making a thesis film, whether it's filming something in the backyard with your friends, whether it's making something indie or something for a studio, there has to be structure to
Mm-hmm.
something. Someone's got to tell people when to show up. Otherwise, no one's going to
Mm-hmm.
be there. Someone's got to make sure that the things that are needed to get the job done, whether it's the set or prop or a piece of technology or whatever those things are there. Otherwise, the job's not going to get done. And I think a lot of people don't look at that as creative work, and
Mm-hmm.
it's all creative work. And that's like the crazy thing, and I feel like I didn't realize that at first, but when you can sit down and define a schedule, you are being creative. You are saying, here's how I'm going to get this done in this amount of time, and these are the things that I want to have, and if I have two more things over here, it's the same as cooking, and you're like, man, I got to put some extra spices in this. Oh man, there's those great onions from that store. That's going to make this dish better than the ones from that store. You're putting something together, and maybe you're not, the showrunner and the writer and the director and and everybody under the sun. But to me, I feel like sometimes that's like an ego thing for people. But
Mm-hmm.
someone needs to be making the space for stuff to be made. If
Yeah.
nobody builds a house, nobody's in the house, because there's no
Mm-hmm.
house.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, I look at almost everything as art, right? Like, if
Mm-hmm.
you look at the plug socket and you go to a different country and you look at their plug socket, someone
Yeah.
designed that. You look
Mm-hmm.
at the blinds in a house, you drive down the street and you see a stop sign, you see a skyscraper somewhere. All these things are things that people designed, and they made decisions on based on what their life experience was before, and why they think that this version will be the most effective and efficient for what the prompt is that they're activating on.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, producing is like that. If no one is going to wrangle everyone together and make sure everyone knows how to respect each other or check in with each other or ask people when they need stuff or something's not clear, you could have a million people who are the most talented people ever, but if no one's communicating what their needs are and helping people solve those things when it's hard to solve those things, when
Yeah.
crunch time comes around or anything happens, like, you know, how are you going to make something? And so much creativity comes naturally into, oh, this person does this, that person does that. We need to make this thing work together, but it's not just put it together. How are you going to introduce that concept to this person and this person to that concept? And how are you going to get them comfortable with the idea of something that might not be how they wanted to do it originally? Or you're going to put two people together who've never worked together before, and by next week they need to be working on this thing as if they've
Yeah.
worked together for 15 years. Like, you've got to figure out how people work. You've got to figure out, you know, how society works and how different cultures work when people come from different places. Just like we were saying in the beginning about how someone in the South might dance around and say, oh, bless your heart, blah, blah, blah. And then they go home and then they whisper mean stuff to somebody else.
Yeah.
And out here, you know, someone's saying about lunch, but like they don't make that plan, but you can't be mad at them because you're doing it too. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that it's the same energy to me as being a character animator. Because you know, when you're a character animator, you can't, like, the way that Ariel versus Aladdin versus the Beast versus Shrek versus, you know, Miles Morales, like, the way that each character is going to respond when somebody does something that that character loves or that character doesn't like, when they are in a hurry. If they say, I'm in a rush, I'm not going, versus I'm in a rush, I better get there or they'll be mad at me. The way that these characters need to be treated like humans is the same as how real people need to be treated like humans too.
Yeah.
So to me,
Nice.
it's very different, you know?
I can see the vision.
You know, when everyone gets together and they collectively make a character that you don't even think when the movie is paused doesn't exist. It's the most incredible thing ever. And those people do that because there's people who are also helping smooth anything out along the way, get those resources or convince them why they don't need those resources, whatever those things are, to get the result across where you watch something and you relate to it and you feel like that little bear running around on the screen is real and breathing and you care about it, and your heart hurts if something sad happens to it. No one goes like, I didn't care about what happened to that little bear, it's just a drawing anyway. That's like, what?
Right. Yeah, they become real.
Yeah.
Can I ask, you have a film Blewish, like, what is currently happening with, or you talk about Blewish and like kind of a synopsis of it, but like what is currently happening with Blewish? Like, I understand there's like a, you know, for some people they like the festival cycle of things, and then after you're done with that, what are the plans with it, and then like what are the plans for other stories?
For sure. So Blewish is a short film that I made between 2020 and 2021, working with a bunch of people. I didn't just make it myself. And it's a story that is an original story and it's a fictional story, but it's based on real life and my real life as a kid, growing up being mixed race, Black and Jewish. And it's not about those things as much as it's about not always fitting into spaces when a space has an expectation of what everybody in that space is like. And you know, and then the power of representation and being able to feel seen or helping someone else feel seen, and what they can do in turn to help you feel seen as well. And it's been in festivals. It still is in festivals. It's been in festivals pretty consistently since it came out. It's very short, so it's easy to put in festivals. It's only 4 minutes long. And that's the tip I'll say, going back to the thing about if you're doing an indie project. If you make something that's under 5 minutes, people can program that anywhere. There's always time for 5 minutes. We'll do screenings sometimes. We'll watch it twice. It's 5 minutes, you know?
Nice.
But, you know, it's a story that I think has you know, been nice in festivals. But what I really appreciate the most, even though I love when it's in festivals and when I've been able to travel to festivals and meet the other filmmakers and, you know, get to appreciate me and the craft of it, when I get to do screenings that are at schools that can be, and not they're not always at schools that are Jewish specifically or anything. Sometimes they are. Sometimes we've done screenings at synagogues. We've done screenings at Jewish day schools all around the world. We've done like there's some happening in England right now, but we've also done screenings at in spaces that are neither Black nor Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever there's like a kid afterwards or a family that says, sometimes there'll be a kid or a parent who goes like, oh, this is a story that like now that the teacher's seen this in the classroom, they know how my kid is feeling. Cause like, sometimes you say, I feel like this, and someone goes, you feel like this.
Yeah.
And then they downplay how you feel in a situation because they think you're just you. But then having a story that you can share that someone else goes, oh, you didn't make that story. And it's also a similar feeling to how I hear you're feeling. It's when I was making it, I was just making it as catharsis, and I wanted to make it short, and and I connected to my own story, obviously. But when I see kids doing it, like using it to empower them to feel better in their spaces that they're in, that's something that's really the reason why I made it. I was at a bookstore a few years ago, and there was a parent who was trying to buy a book for their kid who appeared mixed race, and they couldn't find a book, and they were just saying something like, oh man, I wish there was a book that looked like my kid and had similar background to my kid so I could buy that book. And they were just talking to whoever, and I wanted in that moment to be like, oh, I'm an artist, I'll just draw a drawing of your kid, and then at least they have a drawing of them. Like, I can't make a book right here, right now, but like, you can have this. And I didn't do that because it's real life, and you don't do that usually. But the idea stuck with me, and I just was like, man, if I was me now, if I was me when I was a kid, and there was something that people could be watching, what would that be? And that's how that film came about, and that's why people still want to play it in schools and programs, and that's why I saw it's not up on YouTube. I don't know if it's ever going to be up on just full public, because it's not there for comments and likes and stuff. It's just supposed to be a story to connect when you have time to engage with it in an intentional setting, But I really would like to turn it into a children's book, because then that'll fill the full premise of actually why I made the short, which was to give people an accessible thing who felt like me when I was a kid and had a similar background to me. And there's still not a lot of content like that. So I'd love to, get that out there.
What is the maybe intended or unintended benefit of the festival circuit that you've experienced? And I mean intended and unintended, like you went in intentional, and then maybe there were some unintended things that you didn't think about before.
Sure. I mean, there was one moment at one of the festivals where we were at a festival in Wilmington, North Carolina, and that was very cool.
My mom used to live there.
I'd never been there, and I loved it. It was a really cool little city. A lot of good breweries, a lot of art everywhere, a lot of just people. Whenever you're in a smaller town, everybody's generally friendly when tourists come around, because everyone's something different. And they did this big festival, and afterwards, one of the people who had watched the film said something about like, oh, my heart hurt so much for that kid when he was like not accepted at the birthday party. And and this short film does not have a birthday party in it. There's a moment where the kid goes to a Shabbat dinner and feels a little out of place. But there's no one's wearing birthday hats. No one's giving a gift to anybody. There's no visual cues in there implying anything outside of it just being a dinner where everybody is. And that was something that felt so nice, because I was like, she watching this film does not connect to any of the context in this film at all, but still receive the intention of the emotional feeling that was supposed to be conveyed when she saw it. Even though she got like the details wrong, the point of it was received correctly. And I think that's what's so fun about a festival is you get to go around and you get to see everybody's things. Everybody's excited to watch everyone else's work, and it feels very uplifting and supportive. And even if people aren't from the same background or location, everybody's there with best intention to like stuff. I used to do stand-up comedy a little bit, and sometimes I'll have a
Mm-hmm.
comic who goes, "Man, that audience sucks," and it's like, no, the audience doesn't suck. Like, they came to see comedy. They showed up ready to laugh because they bought a ticket to go see comedy today. So it's the content that's the problem in this scenario.
Yeah.
Because they are
And
there and they're
sometimes you
ready.
got to think about the audience and can you adapt? Because like my twin brother does comedy and he's done it
Mm-hmm.
since we were in college, and he went to Europe, like Scotland, England, and stuff. Like
Sure.
was that last year? And he tries to do comedy in different places, but he's an American, so maybe American comedy is not funny to them. So
Exactly.
they didn't really laugh. So it's like there's like cultural nuances, and even in America, like going to a black room versus a white room, or there's just all
Completely.
these cultural
Completely.
differences where people laugh at different things. So.
No, and people will say, "Oh, English comedy is so dry and funny," and then there's people out here who are like, "English comedy sucks. I don't get it. Like, what's the
Mm-hmm.
joke?" And, and I think
Yeah.
that when you go to a film festival, it's like the comedy room, right? Like, everybody's there with best intention. Something should something the best that a joke should ever be received is at a comedy show. The best that a film should ever be received is at a film festival. Like, this is a space where everybody has come to be supportive of you, and that's why you're in the festival. If you get rejected, that sucks, but there's so many submissions to everything, you can never take stuff like that personally. Like,
Yeah.
everything gets so many submissions, especially post pandemic, where stuff has larger submission rates, and the radius is widened out for festivals, and there's the virtual counterparts, and those things can just get overwhelmed totally. But once you get into one, it's so lucky to be able to be at a space where everybody's there to appreciate everything and everyone there. And it's like going to summer camp or something, where you make friends with people just for those couple of days because everybody's there experiencing something new, and they're like-minded. And even
Mm-hmm.
if someone's like, "I made a horrible themed film about murder and blah 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 blah," etc., it's like, we're all here to see that too. Like, we're all at the festival. Like,
Yeah.
you can see something funny, you see something dramatic, you could see a feature film, and then you can go watch 25 short films and all of this stuff that you can't create that space yourself.
Mm-hmm. As you continue in the animation industry, do you have any goals as far as the purpose around, or as far as your purpose around identity, whether that's trying to be someone who proudly shares who they are, and so that others cannot feel alone, and or like adding to the representation? Like, what are some of your goals?
I mean, the more I get older, and the more that I experience the industry, and good writing and good films and all those things, um, the more that I realize everyone is always putting themselves into everything,
Mm-hmm.
and again, like I was saying before, with the community aspect of filmmaking, you're never going to have an entire team where everybody is you. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody might be black on a production, everybody might be Jewish on a production, everybody might be male on a production. Like, there's similarities that's
Yeah.
possible, that everybody's there, but also, like, everyone grew up in a different socioeconomic class, everyone grew up in a
Mm-hmm.
different city, everyone has parents with different political views.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's still going to be different, and they're still bringing all themselves to it. So you think about, like, you know uh, Dan Haskett designing Ariel, for
Mm-hmm.
example, and it's like, okay, well, he's not a mermaid, and he's not a white woman with red hair, and like, he's not 16 years old. There's a million things that you could say he's not, but
Yeah.
there's so many things that he is,
Mm-hmm.
that are what that character is. And to that degree, you make it, you don't want to say everything has to be like you,
Mm-hmm.
but you do want to be putting yourself into everything. So,
Yeah.
I could write a story about I could, like, if someone hired me to write a story about a kid who is not my background,
Mm-hmm.
I'll still be putting what my experiences are, because I'm not anyone else. I've never
Yeah.
lived anyone else's life. And hopefully
Mm-hmm.
the director or the showrunner or whoever the creative lead is that you're writing this thing for knows how to take those things and their experiences and shape it into something that still feels relatable from who that character is and how that character speaks, and
Yeah.
what they are trying to take out of that. But I it's, if I was to sit down and say I'm going to write a story about like a small girl who lives in the mountains of the Himalayas, and it would just be like, why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
If someone said, I wrote this story, can you direct it? I'd lean on them to learn more about that whole story, to do that authentically. But if I was just to say, this is like a voyeuristic, ooh, that would just be so fun. It's
Yeah.
just not going to feel genuine. It's not necessarily bad to do. That's where we've gotten a lot of representation that's led to so many of us being inspired to be here doing new representation now. But,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, like, is it as meaningful when someone tells a story that's just not about, like, not like them at all, and every person who's working on it isn't like that character at all? It might be a good
Yeah.
movie, but it could be a better movie, or it could be a more
Yeah.
meaningful movie,
Mm-hmm.
even if you
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah. There's something I say where it could be applied to probably anything, but like in the animation industry, like everything, like usually I say it about 3D, like everything is tedious. Like when I was in college, like modeling is
Mhm.
tedious, animation is tedious, rigging is tedious, texturing is tedious, but it's like, what tediousness do you like? And like as you're talking, because I've realized like my ex is a writer, and then like I'm just not a writer, because like when I it just seems tedious. Like when I watch stuff where like the character makes dumb decisions, it pisses me off.
Oh, for
and to
sure.
and to have to write somebody making dumb decisions,
Mhm,
like,
mhm,
oh my god, that would
mhm,
be like being an extrovert for me. Like, what? This is just
mhm.
so uncomfortable. And so it's just like that, like the tediousness of that. As you were talking, I was like, this is why I'm not a writer, because it's like, yes, I like understanding how different people work, but having to write someone doing something that I wouldn't do and that I think is dumb, like that is
Mhm, mhm,
crazy.
mhm. Yeah, no, and I love getting into the head of a character, right? And saying, this is this character, they're a crazy extrovert, this is what's going on. And then it's like, now what would they do? And what
Yeah,
would happen from that? And sometimes you can tell when movies like know what they want the movie to end as, but the
yeah,
way that character is, it shouldn't get there. And then someone's out there bending that story to make sure it gets
yeah,
there. And then maybe it should have gone off this whole different way instead. But
yeah,
I think anytime you can look and go, wow, if I was, if you love singing in the shower, but you don't love singing in public,
yeah,
but here's the scene where the character does it. Well, what would I be doing if no one was there? Because that's
yeah,
how this character feels when they're there,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
and then the intentionality, I think about like Mark Henn talking about Tiana and how he made her left-handed because Anika Noni Rose was left-handed, and
Nice.
those little details of, this is going to make this character different from another character.
Yeah,
There's also something that needs to be achieved from an artistic standpoint in this space to make it genuine, because he's not left-handed. I don't believe, maybe he is, but I don't believe he is. And I don't think any other Disney characters were before. So
mm-hmm.
he's going to figure this out, but it's also going to have Anika Noni Rose connect to this character
Yeah,
more as well. And taking intentionality, I think, out of anything you do, or putting intentionality in
mm-hmm.
to everything. I think about this a lot when it comes to books and scripts, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you read the line that says like, exterior day, a boy waits at the bus stop, or a
Mm-hmm.
boy walks into the classroom, the first thing you picture is a white boy. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's just how it's what happened just now.
Mm-hmm.
And the we're so used to so many shorthands now, I think, in film.
Yeah,
Oh, the hero's journey should be like this. To save the cat
yeah,
moment should be at this page. Oh, this character is white unless specifically
yeah,
said. Oh, a small dark skinned boy sits in front of the bus stop. And they're like, ooh, who's
yeah,
that kid? And that's because things were so similar for so long, people could go,
Mm-hmm.
what's that movie? Like, it's a romantic comedy. Well, that beat shouldn't happen in that story because that's not what happens in romantic comedies. But then you start getting a Knocked Up or Judd Apatow making a This Is 40 or a Funny People, where he was saying, well, no, when it's funny, it should be funny. When it's serious, it should be serious. And I want you're coming to this story to learn about the characters, because we don't need another romantic comedy that follows the exact same beats as the past 20 years of 80s through 90s of that genre of romantic comedy. Why do we need another one of those? So how can we be intentional about it? And when you write a script, it's nice maybe to say, a fair-skinned child waits for the bus, because then it starts to break down the idea of without a disclaimer, that child is this way. And then there's more intentionality in it. And then people start thinking more about who that character is, instead of, oh, every white kid on screen is just some neutral character. Who's that kid? Where are they from? What do they do? Like, it's not just some generic that's that, but also like, why is that kid black? Justify it in the story for me. Like, maybe everything should be justified as opposed to nothing being justified at all, because it helps the authenticity of the character come through, no matter who it is. I always like thinking about that stuff.
Another Threads moment in the past couple of days was like somebody was making a joke about like, let's write what things are a male engineer, and it's kind of speaking to like what you're saying of like they were like flipping the script on things that are originally male, but then adding male in front of it. So it was just like a woman is opposite, like a engineer is obviously a woman, so we have to say male engineer.
Right. And it's funny because when you read stuff like that, it all of a sudden makes you so aware of like, dang, what was I assuming every time I saw something like that? Like, if you say the boss is coming, you're like, oh, and you picture some big guy walking down the hall, but the boss could be anyone, and it's nice to challenge those things, because I think even if you do that stuff right off the bat, you're already writing a stronger character. You're already building a more interesting world. You're not assuming what I picture is also what someone else pictures. And then there's this communication disparity where we're all watching the story, but like, I don't know if the color red I see is the same color red that you see. Like, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But if you say, wow, that's really bright and saturated, even if it's not, I know what I'm supposed to be taking from that.
Because like animation relies on stereotypes a lot. Like, the hero is curvy, the villain is like squarish.
Yeah, angular,
so, like,
has red and purple and green over here, and blue and white and yellow over there.
So trying to flip things on its head.
Yeah, and I think like the shorthand exists for a reason, because it's more economic. It helps you get through it. You go into a dark lair and there's some big angry eyes and there's a bunch of shadows and bright red. You're like, that's the bad guy. And now you've saved yourself 15 minutes of screen time just explaining who, you go to I guess like Secret Life of Pets is kind of the joke, right? Of like the rabbit is the bad guy, but he just seems like he's not because he's a cute little bunny. But the movie has to spend time setting that up. It's a fun payoff and it works for that movie, but sometimes you don't want to spend that time. But then those things start to become stereotypes. Now all of a sudden every darker character is bad because it's easier. But why are they all like that? And then you start to fall into this structure where now it's hard. Now it feels like a parody if the Jafar in his lair is actually the good guy. Like, we don't know what Jafar would have done to Agrabah. He never says what his plans are for the city. He just doesn't like what the Sultan does, and the Sultan is a little neglectful. So maybe Jafar isn't such a bad guy. Who knows?
Right.
But the colors and shape language set it up from the very beginning, where you know who is the hero and who is the bad guy in the story, and it works for the context of Aladdin. If we're going to talk about Aladdin the whole call.
and just to do like a callback of like, that's why like asking questions is important, because for me, like, I have resting bee face, whatever, and like sometimes depending on the person, because I feel like in 2024 we still haven't figured out how to like interact with quiet people. It's like, we're not evil, we're just like thinking. Some people are has social anxiety, like, so like the asking of the question, like, Jafar, what are your thoughts? And it was like, actually, like, you guys keep like putting spikes on the homeless bench. Like,
Yeah,
I think
and I
that's
want to
wrong.
change that in Agrabah. Like, I'm not happy about that.
Like, and it was like, oh, we just like made him the villain because we never asked the question.
Yeah, like, you know, in Beauty and the Beast, Gaston is the hero of the town. He's the villain for the story that we're following, but the town doesn't know who this beast is. The beast is scary to them, and he's the guy who says, I'm going to protect this. They're not sitting in the house with Belle, who, like you're saying, is a quiet person who's off doing her own thing. They're not seeing all of that as much. They're not seeing what the beast is going through. And if anyone knew that prince before he became a beast, he was also notoriously not a cool prince. That's like the whole premise of the story. So you've got Gaston, who the town is following in the mob song to end the beast and save the village, and they're all supportive of that. But since we were in the perspective of Belle and the beast and Maurice and everyone over there the whole time, it's, you know, it's such a masterclass, I think, in terms of storytelling. Is you've got someone who, of course, he's a handsome guy and he's buff and he looks like the typical hero character, but it's such a masterclass, and you can make everyone else feel so much more relatable and care so much more about them because we're spending time with them. We don't spend really any time with Gaston on his own. The town knows him really well, but like we don't, because we're with these people. So we relate to these people. And that's just such a, you know, we don't relate to Ursula, who's the exiled one from this town, and we don't know why. You know, but like we know that what she wants to do isn't good for the characters that we're spending more time with. And it's amazing how those stories can, well, sometimes they fall into, you know, shape language that became stereotypical over time, or color language that fell into that over time. The fact that you can relate clearly to who the movie wants you to follow, and you don't start going, yeah, I hope Jafar wins. Like, you're not saying that at any point. You know, like, I think that The Lion King is the only one that really shows how bad Scar is as a ruler of the Pride Land. But you know, maybe Yzma's better than Cusco because, like, maybe she wants to rule the area because Cusco's super narcissistic. But we're still down for Cusco to win that story because we're following him the whole time, and we get more intimate moments with him and making those choices, I think, which is, again, the intentionality, right? It's the intentionality of not making a B story where we're following Yzma or whatever made Gaston the way he is, where we relate too much to him now. And now we see that, oh, Gaston's family was exiled and he was drafted to the war by the beast when he was, oh, well, damn, I don't know if I like the beast so much anymore.
And then we have like The Preacher's Wife, where we're like advocating for adultery with Whitney Houston and Denzel Washington, because like, is it because of what is it because of what Dudley is doing, or is it because it's Denzel? We don't know.
It's every Hallmark romantic comedy of like, there's the whether it's the guy or the girl, there's their partner who lives in the big city that's trying to make this big deal that's going to benefit both of them, but they're not there enough in real time right now, and we don't follow that character, so they suck. But meanwhile, over in wherever back home is, for the purpose of whatever this story is, they're back home, and now there's someone who pays attention to them. And that's the one thing that we know this character needs that they're not receiving right now. Even if that other partner maybe did that all the time, but just right now they've got some big deal that's making them focus elsewhere. And then we're like, yeah, you should leave him and go with this person we all just met one day ago. Like, we're into this guy now. He's cool.
It's funny that you bring that up, because like, I'm not the stereotypical like girl / woman where I was like watching like Hallmark, like Lifetime holiday movies. And so like 7 years ago, I was like, all right, I'm going to watch, like, I'm going to be in like the other women on like social media. And then after 5, I'm like, this is the exact same story over and over again. Like, what are y'all doing? Like,
absolutely.
I'm like, I'm out.
It's like that string of movies all through the 90s, like of Matthew McConaughey, and all the posters are him just like leaning on somebody, like Failure to Launch and all of those, Sahara, you know. It's like, oh, he's a slacker guy. But, you know, the tropes are good, and subverting expectations good. All those things are, like, tropes work because they set stuff up easy. But also, if you can subvert expectations from the tropes, or add more feeling to it, or turn something on its head later. And, you know, I love Looper. Looper is one of my favorite movies. And I love that movie is, you know, there's this little kid living out in the countryside with Emily Blunt. And you're like, everyone's coming to kill this little kid, and it's like, oh yeah, because this is the worst little kid. And but you don't know that when it's all starting. You're like, why is this happening? Can't they just talk it out of him? And then
Yeah.
finally you get like moments when, oh, this is uncontrollable. I can see why everyone in the future wants to come back and stop this from happening. But
Yeah.
the setup, you don't know. You expect when you're going to find the villain in that story, the way they set it up, you think you're going to be facing down, with the worst,
Yeah.
biggest villain of all time. But then it's a kid. But
Yeah.
then it is still the worst villain of all time, even though he's only like 6 years old in that movie. And he's like, dang, I can only imagine how much worse he got as an adult in the future. And you
Yeah.
never even see the adult version in the future. But
Yeah.
it's just set up so masterfully, again, where
Mhm.
where all of a sudden you're like, yeah, they got to take that kid out. I get it.
And then I will say, like, because of my experience watching like all the holiday movies, when I watched Always Be My Maybe, that's what was monumental about it, because I'm like, oh, this is the exact same story as like the holiday movies, but they did it differently, and I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Where like Randall Park's like kind of the cutesy one, and she's much more the
Yeah.
business focused one.
Yeah.
And that made me even just now think of Men in Black, right? Like
Mhm.
the very beginning, where like Edgar and his wife are sitting in the house, and he's so mean and awful, and it's just and the house is disgusting, and you're like, this is the guy who makes it disgusting. I don't know if she does anything in this house at all, but this guy's making his house gross. He's super rude and awful. It's so sad that they're secluded out in the country and he's the only other person there. Like, what a nightmare it is for these people. And then he gets hit by the ship, and you're like, good. Good for everybody here. Like, that guy's worse than when he's the bug in the Edgar suit later.
Yeah.
Because at least the bug is there just trying to get back home to his family. Like, he just wants to
Right.
get back to the other ship and get out of there and find his map. And if that house was set up where it's like the most beautiful, that's Hawkeye and his family sitting on their little farm, and they're all having a nice picnic, and now all of a sudden this spaceship hits, you wouldn't be feeling the relief and then the fun of seeing a new villain. You would be, you'd be feeling sad the whole time. I used to feel so sad watching Austin Powers, because the scene where the guy gets steamrolled over, but then after the credits, it goes to that guy's house, and the family's like sad because dad's not coming home from dinner. To me, that's like one of the saddest scenes ever, even though it's so stupid and it's intentional. They know it's going to be sad, and now they're like, you laughed at that guy getting hit by a steamroller, but he had a family, and that family wants to come over for dinner. You're like, oh no.
Right.
You're like, I don't know how I was laughing at that. Because then there's new context, and it changes the story, and it's fun when people figure out smart ways to do that.
So you have My Friend LeVar coming out later this year in October. Like, what are you excited about for that?
I'm so excited about it. I've got a hard copy right here behind my computer, so I can actually pull it up. Yeah, it'll be blurry with this background probably, but here it is. At least you can see my name. You can see LeVar. But I'm really excited about it. It's my first children's book that I've written. It's published, and it's getting a wide release, and I'm learning more about what the plan is still. They're figuring all that out, but it's really exciting. I grew up loving reading Rainbow and being a big fan of LeVar Burton, and all those books that he would bring on Reading Rainbow, stories just from around the world, from just diverse writers or diverse stories, even if not all the writers were always diverse. Like, he found so many ways to introduce books that I never would have heard of if not for him. And this book is about me as a kid watching Reading Rainbow, being inspired to read, going out and finding those books, and there's little nods to a lot of the books that I liked in there, that I still clearly remember now, having a big impact on me and making me want to write and read and travel and meet new people and learn about those things, and go on Wikipedia and learn more about, like, what's that thing like, or who's the author of that book, and and then the whole kind of like key piece of the story is, when I was a little kid, I ran into LeVar Burton one time with my mom, and she took a picture of us together, and I was really excited to see him because I love the show. And I've had this picture for ages, and that picture is why I was able to get the publishing deal, because Yeah, and then the picture's in the book, and my mom has a credit as the photographer of the picture. And it's one of those things where, like, you know, he wants to encourage everyone to read. And I was a little kid being encouraged to read and getting to grow up and having my first published book be a children's book about the guy who made me want to read children's books. And having that picture, you know, because that picture was taken in the 90s. No one has a phone on them. Like, you had to have a camera for a reason that day. It's just, you know, and having that picture and just being something special to me that now, you know, everyone can see, go into a bookstore and, you know, and it's like Blewish a little bit in that way. You have something that when you're a kid means so much to you, and then when you become an adult, you figure out why it meant so much to you, and hopefully you figure out how to share it in a way that lets that connect with other people also, you know. And I hope someone reads this and they go back and they watch a bunch of old Reading Rainbow episodes and they go to the library and they read the real books, you know.
Like I don't know the specifics, but I know I read something about, you know, like whoever the powers that be, like, successfully were like having kids like not be at reading level, and read the word successfully as you will, but then they started seeing the reading levels go up, and they're like, wait, what is happening? It's like if you think of a villain in his lair, like, wait, my plan is being foiled.
The children, they're reading.
The person foiling it was LeVar Burton. Like, he was causing kids to read more. So like they foiled the plan of like American children being dumb. So
and it's, and you know, I'm glad he did. I think that, you know, one of the fun things about reading is, you know, if you're reading a children's book, you've got the illustrations, but they're not moving. So your brain has to imagine how they move, you know, what these characters are doing. And if you have a book that's not illustrated, I think that's just like, I love TV, I love movies, I love video games, I love all these types of content and entertainment vessels, I guess. But when you read a book that doesn't have anything in it, you learn how to pronounce words. You might pronounce words wrong because you just read them, and now you're practicing them in real life and you're trying to use them and learn.
That's actually how you know an avid reader is, like, if they pronounce like words wrong sometimes, it's because they read it first.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, I remember the first time I read Harry Potter, I thought Hermione's name was Hermione because I didn't know how to say that. I never saw that word before. I never saw that name before. And, you know, and you picture characters and your brain imagines what that character looks like, what that world looks like, what that, you know, what that place is. And, you know, a TV show, you're seeing how someone imagined it, and you're still seeing imagination. And movies, you're seeing imagination and art output that people are creating and they're sharing, and you get a vision into what their head is doing and how they take words that were written or ideas that they've had and how they create those things into physical things. But when you read a book with no pictures in it, your brain does all of that. And people say they're not creative, but those people are still out reading news articles and picturing what happened. So maybe they are, you know. They just don't know how to express that.
I think it's kind of crazy how we're like on the same wavelength, because I was literally going to mention Harry Potter because I got to it later as an adult, and because I was living in South Korea and like the 7th movie was about to come out, and they were like, you can't see the movie if you didn't read the books, and I'm like, oh shit, now I gotta like read the books. And so I was about to say kind of what you said, because the way I did it was like I actually listen to books because I read very slowly, but like I would like listen to the book and then like watch the movie, listen to the book, watch the movie, and at the end of it, I was like, actually, I wish I had like listened. Well, I wish I had the context of like beforehand, before I knew what the characters looked like, so that I could like have that perspective of like what would I have made the characters look like if I didn't already know what you all wanted it to look like.
Yeah, and I feel like Harry and Ron are very clearly defined in the book, where like, and then the actors looked exactly like what was being pictured. I feel like Hermione was a little more vague, you know. And then outside of that, besides like Dumbledore looking like Gandalf, everybody, you know, and like a Merlin combined, everybody else was like. Besides, I remember they always had like Snape's crooked nose, and I never knew what that meant as a kid. I was like, what does a hook nose, crooked nose? I don't know what that means, because no one was really saying that. And and it's interesting when you see the movies, you're like, this looks right, but also it wasn't drawn before. It was so.
Mm-hmm.
Would it have ever looked wrong?
Right.
Like you watch the 2003 series of unfortunate events, and I thought, man, they really did a good job adapting that book. It looks right,
Mm-hmm.
But then you watch the Netflix series, and you're like, dang, they really did a good job. It looks right, but none of those things look the same.
Yeah. Yeah. If someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight about your life outside of your work in animation or in
Hmm.
entertainment?
Sure. I mean, I love traveling. I love hanging out. I love going different places and walking all over and walking endlessly and exploring everywhere and checking out new restaurants and talking to the people who are behind the bar or working in the restaurant or people in the shop. And I
Mm-hmm.
just love learning about life. And in my work I try to capture that as much as I can as well too. But I love watching plants grow in the garden. I'm really excited right
Mm-hmm.
now. I've got a sunflower that I grew from a seed, and it's like 15 feet tall, and it just
Oh,
started
nice.
opening today. And it's like, oh, this is really cool. And then you go outside in the morning, ooh, it's taller. Like, oh, there's a
Mm-hmm.
strawberry. I'm going to pick that, and I'll give half to my dog, and we'll both share a strawberry. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just like trying to take time to appreciate things, eating food and trying to guess what the ingredients are, then asking someone, oh, there's all this stuff in there, and they're like, yeah, except for that, we actually did that. Oh, that's cool. Like, I just love what makes life, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
hope that someone's not just like, oh, he's just in there working on stuff. Like, I like to work on stuff because I like experiencing stuff, and I like it. I like working on stuff to experience things. I experience things to tell stories and do other things. I like it. It's
Mm-hmm.
all it's life is what you perceive, right? And then creative content influences what other people perceive about life, and you learn about authors. You learn about I think the whole J.K. Rowling thing is so strange because
Mm-hmm.
she called herself J.K. Rowling so she could pass as a guide to sell her book.
Yeah.
It's and then when I was rereading it the other day, not rereading, I was playing Lego Harry Potter, so I wasn't doing
Mm-hmm.
any reading. But then it occurred to me, like, oh, you usually think that you would think, oh, maybe she set herself up as Harry, like as the
Mm-hmm.
main character, as a proxy. And then you're like, oh no, but maybe she set herself up as Hermione, like. And obviously, as a writer, when you write any story, you are every character. But
Yeah.
it finally clicked to me for the first time that I think that she's Ron and Ginny the most,
Mm-hmm.
because they're red haired, they're impoverished, they're impressed by all the things that are happening in the world, and they want
Mm-hmm.
to add to it. But they're not doing it in the same way that Hermione is with her spells, or Harry is as the chosen one. They're just proxy to this
Yeah.
world around them. And it was the first time that I was like, oh, maybe she's like that, but she's writing this whole story,
Mm-hmm.
and then she can't even see where in the world she is. But the way she told the story encouraged so many people to be the way that they are now, which is counter to how she perceives the world. But I also have to imagine that it's a generational thing. I imagine there
Mm-hmm.
has to be there's what she grew up as that she doesn't want challenged because it feels like it underwrites who she is. But
Mm-hmm.
she also wrote a book about challenging the norm, and
Mm-hmm.
now the norm is too challenged. And that's when you start to move through time, right? Like when you
Yeah.
start going, oh, I don't understand why they're making movies like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, because everyone grows to a certain moment in time that's moving forward,
Yeah.
and then there's a time when you start to move backwards, and it happens to everybody, but it happens at totally different times. Like the cliche of the football player who was such a pro in high school that now they don't do anything for the
Yeah.
rest of life, but they just show you their trophy from high school football, and they're like, oh, those were the greatest days. And it's like, damn,
Mm-hmm.
you had 70 more years left after that, so it's a shame that happened so quick.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
interesting to see it. I don't know.
I actually have a tangential YouTube channel that I only got 2 interviews up, but the idea is to cover that the sports thing, because I was excited about what Kobe was going to do with animation, and I
Yeah,
called the
same.
YouTube channel Second Act Careers because so many sports people uh, concentrate so much on sports that they get depressed once, like if particularly if they make it to like the top NFL, NBA, all this stuff, they get depressed once they retire. And so I interview people who kind of figured out after their career or after their career was tarnished, like what did you do? And they're doing like dynamic things. And so it's just harder to get in touch with athletes, but like
Sure.
That was my idea. Like I would talk to kids and schools and they're like in fourth grade, like, oh, I want to be a football player. And it's like, all right, and then what after that? Because like not trying to be like, oh, you're not gonna be a football player, but like you have to have other
I mean,
goals.
it's the same thing as like, you know, I know Soul gets mixed reviews from people, but like the quintessential meaning of Soul, where Joe finally plays with the band and he's wanted his whole life to get to play with the band. And then he leaves and he's like, what are we doing now? And Dorothea's like, meeting here tomorrow and playing with the band because you're in the band.
Right.
And he's like, oh, I don't have a goal anymore. And it's like, oh, and, you know, even going back to what we were saying at the beginning of the call, like, or this conversation, like, you know, when I wanted to go to school and be a 2D Disney animator, and then it's like, ooh, that's changing. I can only imagine, like, you know, the people who did it even longer and longer and longer and weren't just coming into school with the hope of doing it maybe someday, but like the people who are doing it all the time. And, you know, and there's plenty of people who have adapted incredibly successfully in many, many ways, of course. And there's also people who struggle with that, or there's people who just do it independently at home. Like everybody's totally different, but I think that's why I like doing so many different things. If you have many interests and you have many hobbies, if you have more friends than just one friend, if you try to make your world rich, if something falls by the wayside because nothing's in your control, if something falls by the wayside, that can't be the only thing you have, because what do you do? It just is scary. It's just so scary.
Indeed. So if people want to follow you on social media, where can they follow you?
Yeah, I have a Instagram, Art of Ezra, and I have a LinkedIn page. I don't know, but my Art of Ezra Instagram is probably the best one. I was on Twitter until it became X, and then I was kind of like, no, we have to do tweets that are longer than a tweet, and everything's crazy on here, and I can't even see like the people who are following. I'm following. I get a For You page. So I was like, I don't know about this one anymore. So for now, until I end up somewhere else, the Art of Instagram is probably the best way to find me.
Cool. So I want to thank you for letting me highlight you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun. I love you know, the other interviews you've done and everyone you've talked to, and I was very flattered when you were like, oh, do you want to be on one of these? I was like, yeah, for sure. Let me not sound too excited.
Yeah, you're like, yeah.
I think I'm available. I don't know.
Like,
no, this is a lot of fun. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
No problem. And to everyone out there, I want you to like So I Know It's Real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to Citadel, sign up for post notifications to show your zeal, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.